My name is Maxwell, I'm 37 years old, and I never thought I'd be telling a story about my wife slapping me in front of her secret lover and our so-called friends. They all laughed at my humiliation that night, enjoying the spectacle of my marriage crumbling before my eyes. What they didn't expect was that within 10 minutes, every single one of them would be leaving my house in ambulances. I didn't start the violence, but I certainly finished it. Before I share what happened, let me know where you're watching from by dropping your location in the comments. And hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had to stand up for yourself when everyone was against you. Veronica and I met in high school. She was the beautiful cheerleader with the infectious laugh, and I was the computer club president with big dreams. Everyone was surprised when she agreed to go to prom with me, but what started as an unlikely pairing blossomed into what I thought was a perfect love story. We dated through college, supported each other's early careers, and tied the knot in a beautiful ceremony surrounded by friends and family 12 years ago. The early years of our marriage were everything I'd hoped for. We traveled, built our careers, and created a home together. I worked my way up in the IT sector, eventually landing a position as a senior project manager at a prestigious tech firm. The job was demanding, often requiring 60-hour work weeks and frequent business trips, but it afforded us the lifestyle Veronica had grown accustomed to. We purchased a beautiful 4-bedroom house in Oakwood Estates, one of the most exclusive neighborhoods in our city. Our backyard had a pool and entertainment area that became the gathering spot for our social circle during summer months. Over time, I noticed subtle changes in Veronica. The woman who once expressed gratitude for simple acts of kindness began to expect luxury as a baseline. The designer purse that made her eyes light up with surprise on our 5th anniversary became merely adequate by our 10th. Her tastes grew increasingly expensive, and her contentment seemed to diminish proportionally. Still, I wanted to make her happy, so I worked harder, took on additional projects, and accepted more responsibility at work to ensure our financial stability. Our social circle consisted primarily of other successful couples. Cassandra and Brandon had been our friends since college. She worked in marketing, and he was a financial advisor. They lived 3 streets over from us and were fixtures at our weekend gatherings. Evelyn and Nicholas joined our group 5 years ago after moving into the neighborhood. He was a surgeon, and she ran a successful boutique downtown. We vacationed together, celebrated holidays as a unit, and shared the intimate details of our lives over countless bottles of wine. In retrospect, I should have noticed the warning signs sooner. About a year ago, Veronica began going out more frequently with friends from work. Her wardrobe underwent a complete transformation, featuring more revealing clothes than she'd worn in years. She started spending hours at the gym and salon, emerging with a new hairstyle and highlights that cost more than our monthly utilities. When I complimented her changes, she would shrug and say, "It's not for you," with a laugh that didn't quite reach her eyes. The emotional distance grew alongside her physical transformation. Casual criticisms peppered our conversations, with frequent comparisons to other men who apparently possessed qualities I lacked. My work habits, once appreciated as dedication to our future, became evidence of my obsession with money and emotional unavailability. When I asked for specific examples of how I could improve, she would sigh dramatically and say, "If you don't already know, there's no point in explaining it." Her phone became an extension of her hand, with constant text notifications that she would shield from my view. Passwords changed on all her devices, and girls' trips multiplied on the calendar. Each time I expressed concern, I was labeled controlling and paranoid. Gaslighting, I would later learn, was the proper term for what was happening. 6 months ago, I experienced a minor heart incident that doctors attributed to stress and overwork. Lying in that hospital bed, watching Veronica check her phone more than she checked on me, I made a decision to recalibrate my priorities. I began delegating more at work, declined 2 promotion opportunities that would have required additional travel, and committed to being more present at home. I thought I was saving my marriage. In reality, I was simply giving Veronica more freedom to pursue her affair. Trevor entered our social circle about 4 months ago as Veronica's work colleague. Tall, with carefully styled hair and the kind of confident smile that instantly puts you on edge, he quickly integrated himself into our friend group. Looking back, the lingering glances between him and Veronica were obvious, but I trusted my wife implicitly and dismissed my intuition as baseless jealousy. Despite my reduced work hours, Veronica's distance only grew. Desperate to reconnect, I planned a special dinner party for our closest friends. I believed that surrounding ourselves with people who knew us as a couple might remind her of what we had built together. I could not have been more wrong about how that evening would unfold. I returned early from a 3-day business trip, canceling my final meetings to prepare a surprise for Veronica. Our anniversary was approaching, and I wanted to demonstrate my commitment to our relationship by hosting an intimate dinner party with our closest friends. I spent the entire day preparing, cleaning every corner of our home and planning a menu featuring all of Veronica's favorite dishes. I selected a bottle of Chateau Margaux 2010, the same wine we had shared on our honeymoon, and arranged fresh flowers throughout the house. Everything needed to be perfect. I texted everyone in our circle except Veronica, asking them to arrive at 7 p.m., 30 minutes before she was expected home from work. They would hide their cars down the street, waiting in the darkened living room for the moment when she walked through the door. In my mind, her face would light up with surprise and appreciation, reminded of how much our friends and I cherished her. By 7:15 p.m., Cassandra and Brandon, Evelyn and Nicholas had arrived, bringing expensive bottles of wine and elaborate cheese platters. But they weren't alone. Trevor stood among them, an uninvited addition to my carefully orchestrated evening. When I questioned his presence with a raised eyebrow, Cassandra quickly explained that they had run into him at the wine shop and mentioned our gathering. "We couldn't just leave him out," she said with a strange smile that didn't quite match her tone. From the moment they arrived, something felt off. Conversations seemed strained, punctuated by significant glances and half-smiles that excluded me. Trevor moved through my home with the comfort of someone who had visited many times before, knowing exactly where to find wine glasses without asking. When I mentioned that Veronica would be home soon, he checked his watch and smiled knowingly, saying, "She's running a bit late tonight. Meeting ran long." How would he know that? I wondered, but kept the question to myself. When Veronica finally arrived at 8:30 p.m., over an hour late, her surprise seemed performative rather than genuine. "Oh my goodness!" she exclaimed, one hand dramatically pressed to her chest. "What's all this?" Her eyes scanned the room, lingering on Trevor a beat too long before settling on me with a tight smile. Throughout dinner, I noticed intimate glances exchanged between Trevor and Veronica across the table. They shared inside jokes that made little sense to me but caused everyone else to erupt in knowing laughter. When I asked to be included, Veronica would wave her hand dismissively. "It's a work thing. You wouldn't understand." As the evening progressed, the subtle mockery became increasingly obvious. Brandon commented on my adorable attempt at cooking a gourmet meal, while Cassandra criticized the wine pairing in a condescending tone. Nicholas kept checking his watch, as if counting down the minutes until he could politely leave. Only Evelyn seemed uncomfortable with the dynamic, avoiding eye contact and contributing little to the conversation. Midway through the main course, I raised my glass for a toast, hoping to steer the evening towards something resembling normalcy. "To relationships that stand the test of time," I said, looking directly at Veronica. "And to friends who support each other through life's challenges." The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by Trevor's barely suppressed snort before everyone half-heartedly raised their glasses. After dinner, as I cleared plates in the kitchen, I overheard whispered fragments of conversation from the dining room. "How long before he figures it out?" Brandon asked, followed by Cassandra's hushed reply. "He's completely clueless. They've been at it for months right under his nose." My hands froze on the dishes, ice flooding my veins as the implications registered. Returning to the dining room with dessert, I found Trevor sitting in my chair beside Veronica, his arm casually draped across the back of her seat. They separated slightly when they saw me, but the damage was done, Still, I maintained my composure, determined to address the situation privately with Veronica later. As I served the tiramisu I had spent hours perfecting, another round of inside jokes circulated the table. This time, when everyone except me burst into laughter, I politely asked to be included. "What's so funny?" I could use a good laugh too. The room fell silent. Veronica's expression shifted from amusement to something harder, colder. She stood slowly, walked around the table to where I was standing, and without warning, slapped me across the face with enough force to snap my head sideways. The sound echoed through the suddenly quiet room. "That's for being so pathetically oblivious," she said, her voice dripping with contempt. "Did you really think I could be satisfied with someone like you?" The shocked silence lasted only seconds before Trevor broke it with a smug comment. "Maybe now you understand who she really wants." This triggered a cascade of laughter from everyone except Evelyn, who looked down at her plate with obvious discomfort. I stood there, my cheek burning not just from the slap but from the public humiliation orchestrated by the woman I had loved for more than a decade. Our friends, people who had celebrated holidays in our home and stood beside us at our wedding, were laughing at my pain. My world wasn't just shattering, it was being ground into dust and scattered by the very people I had trusted most. Time seemed to freeze in that moment. The laughter around me distorted into a distant echo as a strange clarity washed over me. Years of ignored intuition crystallized into perfect understanding. I touched my cheek where Veronica's hand had connected, feeling the heat radiating from what would surely become a bruise. "How long?" I asked, my voice calm despite the storm raging inside me. The laughter abruptly stopped, replaced by uncomfortable shifting in seats. Veronica crossed her arms defensively but lifted her chin in defiance. "Does it matter?" "6 months," Trevor volunteered with a smirk, clearly enjoying his role in my humiliation. "While you were working late to buy her pretty things, I was giving her what she really needed." I turned to our friends, searching their faces for any sign of the loyalty I thought we shared. "And you all knew? All this time?" Brandon avoided my gaze, suddenly fascinated by his wine glass. Cassandra, however, had no such reservations. "Of course we knew. It was obvious to anyone paying attention. Maybe if you weren't so boring in bed, she wouldn't have needed to look elsewhere." The casual cruelty of her statement hit harder than Veronica's slap. These weren't just witnesses to my humiliation, they were active participants who had chosen sides long ago. "I'd like everyone to leave," I said quietly, my hand gripping the back of a chair to steady myself. Trevor stood up, towering over me with his 6'3" frame. "We'll leave when we're ready." "Veronica doesn't want us to go yet, do you, baby?" He reached for her hand, which she willingly provided. "This is still my house," I insisted, feeling a surge of something unfamiliar. Not anger exactly, but rather a profound unwillingness to be disrespected further on my own property. Trevor stepped closer, invading my personal space. "What are you going to do about it, keyboard warrior? Go back to your computers and leave the real men to handle your wife." I remained still, determined not to escalate the situation. "I'm asking you to leave my home. All of you." "Or what?" Trevor pressed his finger into my chest, pushing me backwards slightly. "You'll ask us again nicely? Pathetic." "Trevor, don't," Evelyn said suddenly, the first words she'd spoken in my defense all night. "Let's just go." Trevor ignored her, his focus entirely on me. "You know what your problem is? You never learned to fight for what's yours. That's why it was so easy to take her from you. She's not property to be taken," I replied, still maintaining my composure. "She made her choice. Now make yours and leave peacefully." Trevor's face flushed with anger at my continued refusal to react with violence. "You sanctimonious prick," he growled, and then his control snapped. His right fist came flying toward my face in a wild haymaker that telegraphed his intentions from a mile away. Years of recreational boxing at the company gym served me well in that moment. I sidestepped his punch easily, watching as his momentum carried him forward off balance. But Trevor wasn't done. He recovered quickly, turning with a snarl to launch another attack. This time he swung with his left, aiming for my midsection. I blocked the blow with my forearm, the impact painful but manageable. Our audience had gone silent, the entertainment value of the situation shifting into something more dangerous than they had bargained for. "Stop this," I warned him, backing away to create distance. "You don't want to do this." "Oh, I absolutely do." Trevor advanced again, throwing another punch that I dodged. What happened next occurred in slow motion from my perspective. Trevor, frustrated by his inability to land a solid hit, charged forward like a bull. I planted my feet and, when he was too committed to change course, delivered a textbook right cross directly to his jaw. The impact reverberated up my arm as his head snapped back. There was a distinct cracking sound, and then something small and white flew from his mouth, skittering across the hardwood floor. Trevor's tooth had been knocked clean out. He stumbled backward, eyes wide with shock, before losing his balance entirely. As he fell, the back of his head connected with the corner of our marble kitchen island with a sickening thud. Blood immediately began flowing from both his mouth and a fresh gash on his scalp. The room erupted into chaos. Veronica screamed and rushed toward Trevor, but in her haste she slipped on spilled wine, landing hard on her tailbone. Cassandra backed away from the scene in horror, tripping over our coffee table and hitting her head on the fireplace mantel. Brandon, who had suffered from severe asthma since childhood, began wheezing heavily, fumbling for an inhaler that wasn't in his pocket. Evelyn, always squeamish around blood, promptly fainted, and Nicholas injured his wrist trying to catch her before she hit the floor. In the span of perhaps 15 seconds, every person who had been laughing at my humiliation was now injured, bleeding, unconscious, or struggling to breathe. I stood in the center of this tableau, strangely calm as my professional crisis management training took over. "Nicholas, get Brandon's inhaler from their car," I directed, already moving toward Trevor to assess his injuries. "Cassandra, stay still. You might have a concussion." I pulled my phone from my pocket and dialed emergency services, giving them our address and a concise description of the multiple injuries requiring attention. While waiting for help to arrive, I applied pressure to Trevor's head wound with a clean kitchen towel, instructed Veronica how to help Evelyn regain consciousness, and found Brandon's spare inhaler in Cassandra's purse. I moved methodically from person to person, providing basic first aid with the detached efficiency of someone operating on autopilot. The wail of sirens announced the arrival of help approximately 8 minutes after my call. 3 ambulances and 2 police cruisers pulled into our circular driveway, bathing the front of our house in alternating red and blue lights. Paramedics swarmed in with stretchers and equipment, taking over care for the injured while police officers began questioning witnesses about what had occurred. As Trevor was carried out on a stretcher, still unconscious, Veronica shot me a venomous look. "This isn't over," she hissed. "You'll pay for this." Then she climbed into the ambulance beside him, leaving me to explain to the police why our dinner party had ended with multiple ambulances. Officer Thompson, a stocky man with salt and pepper hair and experienced eyes, took my statement in the living room while paramedics continued treating the less seriously injured. "Walk me through what happened, sir," he said, notebook in hand. I recounted the events truthfully, including Veronica's affair, the planned humiliation, Trevor's aggressive behavior, and my act of self-defense. Nicholas, his wrist now wrapped in a preliminary splint, reluctantly confirmed that Trevor had indeed thrown the first punch. "He came at Maxwell like a madman," Nicholas admitted, avoiding my gaze. "Maxwell tried to defuse the situation multiple times." Cassandra, holding an ice pack to her head while being examined for signs of concussion, attempted to contradict this account. "Trevor was just joking around. Maxwell overreacted because he was jealous." "Ma'am, throwing punches isn't joking around," Officer Thompson replied dryly. "And according to both your husband and Mr. Burke here, the victim was the primary aggressor." Brandon, now breathing more easily after treatment, nodded in confirmation. "Trevor definitely swung first. Multiple times." Officer Thompson turned back to me. Mr. Anderson, based on witness statements, this appears to be self-defense. However, given the extent of injuries and the complicated nature of the situation, I recommend you secure legal counsel. We'll need you to come to the station tomorrow to provide a formal statement. I nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation despite my emotional numbness. Of course, officer. I'll cooperate fully. The paramedics provided a rundown of injuries before departing. Trevor had suffered a concussion, facial lacerations, and obviously, a missing tooth. Veronica had minor contusions from her fall. Cassandra was being transported to the hospital for observation due to her mild concussion. Brandon's asthma attack had been severe enough to warrant continued monitoring. Evelyn had been treated for shock but was stable, and Nicholas had suffered a sprained wrist. As the last ambulance pulled away, Veronica's parting words echoed in my mind. "This isn't over." The threat hung in the air like a promise as I closed the front door on the receding emergency lights. Standing alone in our suddenly silent house, I surveyed the wreckage of what had been a meticulously planned dinner party. Wine stains splashed across the cream-colored carpet like abstract art. Broken glass glittered under the chandelier light. A smear of blood marked the corner of the kitchen island. It looked like a crime scene, which I supposed it technically was. I began cleaning mechanically, desperate for something constructive to do while my mind processed the seismic shift in my reality. As I scrubbed Trevor's blood from the marble, I wondered how many times he had been in my home while I was away on business. How many times had he slept in my bed? Showered in my bathroom? Laughed with my wife about my ignorance? While picking up scattered items knocked over during the chaos, I discovered concrete evidence of what I already knew. Veronica's purse had spilled during her fall, revealing photographs hidden in an inner pocket. Images of her and Trevor together at what appeared to be a beach resort, their intimacy unmistakable. Her phone, its screen cracked from the fall, lit up with a text notification from T that read, "Can't wait to have you all to myself once we get rid of him." Trevor's wallet had fallen from his jacket, and as I picked it up, hotel receipts fluttered to the floor. The Grand Hyatt downtown, regular Wednesday bookings, always the same room number. My name on the credit card statement, I noted with bitter irony. I had literally paid for their rendezvous. The most disturbing discovery came when I moved the bookshelf to clean underneath it. A leather-bound journal had fallen behind it, one I recognized as Veronica's. Driven by a need to understand the extent of the betrayal, I began reading. The journal detailed not just the timeline of their affair, which had indeed been going on for 6 months, but something far more painful, the active participation of our friends in my humiliation. C&B suggested we use their lake house this weekend. They'll invite M for fishing while T and I have the master bedroom. B thinks it's hilarious how clueless M is. E seems uncomfortable with our arrangement, but N convinced her to keep quiet. He says M's obsession with work makes him deserve this. T suggested tonight should be the night we finally tell M. Everyone will be there to see his reaction. C has bet $100 that he'll cry. B thinks he'll just apologize and try to win me back. Either way, it should be entertaining. Page after page detailed how these people, whom I had considered family, had not only enabled the affair but actively participated in creating opportunities for it. They had mocked me behind my back, placed bets on my reaction, and planned my humiliation as if it were a spectator sport. I sat on the floor surrounded by physical evidence of their collective betrayal, reviewing all the warning signs I had ignored over the past year. The inside jokes, the sudden schedule changes, the group vacations that fell through at the last minute when I was unexpectedly able to join. All orchestrated. All designed to make me the fool. As dawn broke through the windows, illuminating the now clean but forever changed space, I made a decision. I would not be their victim any longer. I would not beg, plead, or attempt to salvage relationships built on such fundamental disrespect. Instead, I would take control of what happened next. At precisely 8 a.m., I called Rebecca Sullivan, a divorce attorney renowned for her uncompromising approach to protecting her client's interests. Her firm had represented a colleague during his contentious divorce the previous year, and he had emerged with his finances and dignity intact. I secured the first available appointment for 10 a.m. that same day. Before leaving for the meeting, I took several precautionary measures. I transferred half of our joint savings into a new individual account, documented and photographed all evidence of the affair, changed the locks on the house, and packed Veronica's essential items into suitcases that I placed in the garage. These weren't acts of vengeance but of self-preservation. The woman who had orchestrated my public humiliation wouldn't hesitate to empty our accounts or destroy my possessions given the opportunity. Attorney Sullivan listened to my account with professional detachment, occasionally asking clarifying questions. When I finished, she leaned back in her leather chair with a thoughtful expression. Mr. Anderson, based on what you've told me and the evidence you've provided, we have a strong case for a divorce heavily favoring your interests. Wisconsin is a no-fault state, but infidelity can still impact property division when it involves financial misconduct, which the hotel charges on your credit card clearly demonstrate. She outlined a strategic approach focused on documentation, financial protection, and minimal direct contact with Veronica. From this moment forward, do not communicate with your wife except through me. Any threats or accusations she makes should be forwarded directly to my office. This advice proved prescient when I checked my phone after the meeting to find 17 missed calls and dozens of threatening text messages from Veronica. You've ruined everything, one read. I'll destroy you for this, promised another. I forwarded the messages to Rebecca, who immediately began the process of obtaining a temporary restraining order. Returning to work required explanations I wasn't prepared to give, so I requested personal time, citing family emergency. My supervisor, Robert, was unexpectedly supportive. Take whatever time you need, Maxwell. Your projects are in good hands. While I was attempting to maintain a low profile, Veronica launched a social media campaign painting herself as the victim of an abusive husband who had violently attacked her friend out of jealous rage. Mutual acquaintances began sending me screenshots of her posts, asking for my side of the story. Following Rebecca's advice, I maintained dignified silence, neither confirming nor denying her accusations. To process the emotional trauma healthily, I began seeing Dr. Peterson, a therapist specializing in betrayal trauma. What you're experiencing is a form of PTSD, he explained during our first session. The people you trusted most violated that trust in the most profound way possible. Your reaction isn't just about losing your wife, but about losing your entire social support structure simultaneously. I implemented a complete contact blackout with my former friends. Their text messages and voicemails ranged from Cassandra's hostile accusations to Brandon's awkward attempts at explanation. Even Nicholas tried reaching out, claiming he had never meant for things to go this far. I deleted each message without response, focusing instead on rebuilding my life one day at a time. Physical activity became my salvation. I joined a boxing gym where I could channel my anger and betrayal into exhausting workouts. The physical transformation began almost immediately, my formerly desk job physique hardening into something leaner and stronger with each passing week. An unexpected source of support emerged in Jordan, a friend from college days who had drifted away after my marriage. Veronica never liked me, he admitted over coffee. Eventually it became easier to stop trying. Jordan's re-entry into my life brought genuine companionship without the undercurrent of judgment or pity that characterized other interactions. My family rallied around me as well. My parents, who had always maintained a polite but reserved relationship with Veronica, flew in from Arizona to stay with me for 2 weeks. We never said anything because we wanted to respect your choice, my mother confessed. But we always sensed something wasn't quite right with her. My sister Claire called daily, offering practical advice from her own divorce years earlier. At work, rumors inevitably circulated, but instead of the professional ostracism I had feared, I found surprising solidarity. Colleagues who had weathered their own relationship disasters shared their experiences and offered genuine support. My team implemented a tacit understanding that personal questions were off limits, allowing me to immerse myself in projects that required my complete focus. For weeks after the incident, Trevor's attorney sent a threatening letter indicating his intention to sue for damages related to his injuries. Rebecca's response was swift and devastating, including witness statements confirming Trevor as the aggressor, hotel receipts showing his affair with my wife conducted on my credit card, and a counterclaim for emotional distress. We received no further communication from Trevor's legal team. The initial divorce proceedings revealed Veronica's strategy: demand everything and admit nothing. She wanted the house, half my retirement accounts, ongoing alimony, and even custody of our elderly golden retriever, Cooper, despite having shown minimal interest in him throughout our marriage. Rebecca assured me that such unreasonable demands typically signaled a weak position. "She's hoping you'll give in to avoid protracted conflict." "We won't." Through it all, I maintained absolute professionalism at work, delivering results that caught the attention of senior management. The departmental director, Allison, requested a private meeting 6 weeks after the incident. "Your performance during personal crisis has been remarkable," she noted. "When you're ready, we'd like to discuss expanding your role to include international project oversight." The opportunity one had previously declined to save my marriage was being offered again, this time to a very different man. Small moments of peace began appearing in the landscape of my new reality. Morning runs with Cooper in the park near our house. Sunday dinners with Jordan and his wife Sarah. Weekly video calls with my parents and sister. A renewed interest in photography, a hobby abandoned years ago at Veronica's subtle discouragement. These threads of normalcy gradually wove themselves into a new pattern of life, different but increasingly satisfying. The most unexpected development came 2 months after the incident, when Evelyn emailed me directly. "I can't continue being part of this deception," she wrote. "What they did to you was unconscionable, and my silence makes me complicit. If you need someone to testify about the affair and the planned humiliation, I'm willing to do so." Her offer represented the first acknowledgement from anyone in our former social circle that I had been wronged. That evening, I joined Jordan and several of his friends for dinner at a new restaurant downtown. As the conversation flowed easily around topics unrelated to my personal drama, I found myself laughing genuinely for the first time in months. The sound startled me at first, then filled me with a profound sense of gratitude. I wasn't just surviving this betrayal, I was slowly finding my way toward thriving despite it. 3 months after the dinner party that had destroyed my marriage, I stood outside courtroom 307 in the county courthouse, waiting for our scheduled divorce hearing. Rebecca stood beside me, reviewing last-minute details of our strategy. "Remember, stay calm regardless of what allegations she makes. Judge Anderson has a reputation for seeing through emotional manipulation." Veronica arrived with her attorney, a sharp-featured woman whose reputation for aggressive tactics preceded her. My soon-to-be ex-wife had carefully cultivated a vulnerable appearance for the court, wearing minimal makeup and a conservative dress that contrasted sharply with her recent style choices. She avoided my gaze as she passed, whispering something to her lawyer that caused both to glance in my direction. Inside the courtroom, Veronica's attorney launched immediately into allegations of emotional abuse throughout our marriage, claiming that Veronica's affair had been a desperate attempt to find the affection I had withheld. "My client endured years of neglect and controlling behavior," she declared, "culminating in a violent attack against Mr. Trevor Phillips that demonstrates Mr. Anderson's volatile nature." Rebecca calmly presented our evidence when her turn came. Bank statements showing regular withdrawals that couldn't be accounted for in our household expenses. Credit card statements revealing hotel charges and expensive gifts purchased for Trevor. Text messages and emails documenting the affair and the conspiracy to humiliate me publicly. Veronica's own journal entries describing her calculated deception. The most damaging testimony came from an unexpected source. Evelyn had agreed to appear, visibly nervous but determined as she took the stand. "The affair had been going on for at least 6 months to my knowledge," she stated. "Veronica often bragged about how Maxwell would never suspect anything because he trusted her completely." When asked about the night of the incident, Evelyn's testimony directly contradicted Veronica's claims. "Trevor was the aggressor. He taunted Maxwell repeatedly and threw the first punch. Everyone saw it. Maxwell defended himself after trying multiple times to defuse the situation. Regarding the allegation of emotional abuse, Evelyn was equally clear. In all the years I've known them, Maxwell was unfailingly supportive and generous. Veronica was the one who constantly criticized him, often making humiliating comments about him in front of our entire friend group. By the time Rebecca called our final witness, Veronica's facade had crumbled. The bank manager testified that she had attempted to empty our joint accounts the morning after the incident, stopping only when informed that the accounts had been frozen on my attorney's advice. Judge Anderson's ruling came swiftly and decisively. Based on the evidence presented, including documented financial misconduct and the testimony of multiple witnesses, I find that Mrs. Anderson's infidelity materially affected the marital assets. Furthermore, her attempt to remove funds from joint accounts demonstrates bad faith in these proceedings. The judge awarded me the house and full custody of Cooper, required Veronica to reimburse the marital assets used to conduct her affair, and dismissed her alimony request entirely. Her only concession was a modest one-time settlement that Rebecca had strategically offered to avoid appeals. Throughout the judge's ruling, Veronica sat rigidly in her chair, her expression oscillating between disbelief and fury. Outside the courthouse, she made one final attempt to control the narrative, approaching a local reporter who had covered the proceedings. Before she could speak, Rebecca intervened smoothly. Mrs. Anderson might want to consider how additional defamatory statements could affect the generous settlement my client has agreed to. Veronica retreated to her car without comment, the public facade finally giving way to defeat. That same week, I received notification that Trevor's lawsuit had been dismissed with prejudice after his attorney reviewed the witness statements and evidence we had gathered. The legal threat that had loomed over me for months dissolved, removing the last external obstacle to moving forward. Despite being awarded the house in the settlement, I decided to sell it. Every room contained memories I had no desire to revisit. The real estate market was favorable, and the property sold within 3 weeks for significantly more than we had paid. With my share of the proceeds, I purchased a modern apartment in the revitalized downtown district, a space untainted by betrayal and filled with natural light. At work, my focused productivity during personal crisis had not gone unnoticed. The international oversight role Allison had mentioned became official, complete with a substantial salary increase and the flexibility to build my own team. I selected members based not just on technical competence but on personal integrity, creating a professional environment built on mutual respect. My new social circle expanded organically through Jordan's introductions, boxing gym acquaintances who became friends, and colleagues who shared my interest in photography. These relationships developed slowly, built on authentic connections rather than shared history or social obligation. I found myself becoming more selective about who earned my trust, but more generous with those who did. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I literally ran into Lauren at a charity 5K event. We had been acquaintances in college, and she had recently returned to the city after a decade working abroad. Our conversation at the post-race gathering flowed effortlessly, and when she suggested coffee the following week, I accepted without the hesitation that had characterized my recent interactions with women. Through mutual acquaintances, I occasionally heard updates about Veronica and our former social group. Trevor and Veronica's relationship had imploded within weeks of the divorce, his interest apparently contingent on the forbidden nature of their connection. Their friend group had fractured along loyalty lines, with Brandon and Cassandra's marriage reportedly strained by revelations of their own infidelities. Nicholas had accepted a position in another state, effectively removing himself and Evelyn from the aftermath. These snippets of information reached me without evoking the emotional response they once would have. Their continuing drama had become a narrative I observed from a distance rather than a story in which I participated. The holiday season, which I had dreaded as my first alone, arrived with unexpected warmth. Jordan and Sarah insisted I join their family gathering. My parents visited for a week, delighting in the positive changes they observed in my demeanor. Lauren and I attended a New Year's Eve concert downtown, our relationship progressing with a refreshing honesty that contrasted sharply with the deception that had characterized my marriage's final years. 7 months after the incident, a letter arrived from Veronica. The familiar handwriting on the envelope triggered a momentary tightness in my chest, but not the crushing anxiety I might have expected. Inside, she had written a lengthy explanation of her actions, attributing them to insecurities and unresolved traumas from her past. She expressed regret not for the affair itself but for the way things ended, and suggested that perhaps someday we might find closure through conversation. After reading it twice, I placed the letter in a folder with the divorce documents, acknowledging her perspective without feeling obligated to respond. The closure she sought was hers to find independently. Mine had already begun the moment I decided to value myself more than a relationship built on lies. 1 year after the night that had demolished my former life, I hosted a dinner party in my downtown apartment. The gathering bore little resemblance to that fateful evening. Jordan and Sarah, my colleague Marcus and his wife Elena, and Lauren arranged themselves comfortably around my dining table, enjoying a meal we had prepared together. Cooper lounged contentedly near the balcony doors, occasionally accepting affectionate pats from guests passing by. The physical transformation I had undergone was evident in the way my clothes fit my more athletic frame, but the more significant changes were internal. The man who had prioritized peace over self-respect, who had ignored his intuition to preserve a failing marriage, had been replaced by someone who recognized his worth and established boundaries accordingly. My career had flourished under the international role, with frequent travel that now energized rather than drained me. The team I had assembled consistently exceeded performance metrics, creating a reputation for excellence that opened further opportunities. The work-life balance I had once sacrificed everything to achieve now came naturally, a function of clearer priorities and more efficient methods. Lauren and I had developed a relationship built on mutual respect and transparent communication. We moved forward at a deliberate pace, each step considered and consensual. The contrast with my marriage's frantic early passion followed by slow deterioration couldn't have been more pronounced. A week after my dinner party, I encountered Cassandra at the grocery store, an awkward meeting neither of us could avoid in the narrow produce section. She had aged visibly in the past year, stress lines etched around her eyes and mouth. "Maxwell," she acknowledged stiffly. "You look well." "Thank you," I replied, neither hostile nor particularly warm. "How have you been?" Her practiced smile faltered. "Managing. Brandon and I are seeing a counselor." The admission seemed to cost her considerable pride. "And you?" "I heard you're seeing someone new." "I am," I confirmed, not elaborating further. A moment of uncomfortable silence stretched between us before she blurted, "Veronica's miserable, you know. That new guy she's dating, James? He treats her terribly. Always flirting with other women right in front of her." The information was offered with a strange mix of gossip and implied vindication on my behalf. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, and realized I genuinely meant it. Despite everything, I didn't wish continued unhappiness on anyone, even those who had orchestrated my humiliation. "Trevor lost his job," she continued, apparently determined to update me on everyone's misfortunes. "Turns out he had a history of inappropriate relationships with coworkers. The whole group fell apart after everything happened. No one trusts each other anymore." I nodded, unsurprised. "Betrayal has that effect." The comment wasn't meant as a barb, merely an observation. Cassandra flinched slightly nevertheless. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry for my part in it all. We got caught up in the drama of it without considering the real human cost." I accepted her apology with a nod, neither absolving nor condemning her. "I hope you and Brandon find your way through this." With that, I continued my shopping, feeling her gaze follow me down the aisle. 2 days later, Veronica called. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won out. "Maxwell," she began without preamble, "I've been doing a lot of thinking. What happened between us, it wasn't all bad, was it? We had good years together." "We did," I agreed, waiting for her to reveal the purpose of her call. "I've made some terrible mistakes. she continued. The worst was letting you go. James and I broke up, and it made me realize what I threw away with you. I think we should talk about trying again. The proposition was so unexpected that I laughed involuntarily. Veronica, no. You don't mean that, she insisted. We were together for 12 years. That kind of connection doesn't just disappear. It disappeared the moment you decided to betray that connection, I replied calmly. I wish you well, but there's no going backward. You can't tell me you're happier now, she challenged, a note of the old manipulative Veronica emerging. I considered the question seriously before answering. I am. Not despite what happened, but because of it. You freed me from a relationship that wasn't serving either of us. Her sharp intake of breath suggested this wasn't the response she had anticipated. So that's it? 12 years means nothing? It meant everything at the time, I corrected her. And it taught me valuable lessons that I'll carry forward. For that, I can even be grateful. After we disconnected, I felt a sense of completion rather than disturbance. Her call had confirmed what I already knew. The man she had slapped in front of her lover and friends no longer existed. In his place stood someone who valued himself enough to walk away from toxicity, regardless of its familiar packaging. The experience had taught me that rock bottom could become a foundation if you built upon it with intention. The painful dissolution of my marriage and social circle had forced me to identify my core values and establish boundaries that protected them. The betrayal that was meant to break me had instead revealed strengths I hadn't known I possessed. I still had moments of anger and grief for what might have been, but they no longer dominated my emotional landscape. Instead, I focused on cultivating relationships characterized by mutual respect and authentic connection. I approached potential romantic partners with healthy skepticism rather than blind trust, watching their actions more than listening to their words. Most importantly, I had learned that forgiveness didn't require reconciliation. I could release the bitterness of betrayal without inviting the betrayers back into my life. This distinction had proven crucial to my healing process, allowing me to move forward unburdened by either ongoing resentment or misplaced loyalty. What about you? Have you ever had to rebuild after a betrayal, whether in a relationship or friendship? How did you find the strength to move forward? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Sometimes sharing our experiences helps others know they're not alone in their struggles. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel for more authentic discussions about navigating life's challenges. Share this video with someone who might need to hear that their rock bottom can become a foundation too. Thank you for accompanying me on this journey of reflection. Remember, the people who try to tear you down have already placed themselves beneath you. Build something beautiful from where you stand, and never let anyone convince you to accept less than the respect you deserve.